So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Emilie Cléret and I work at Leadership Trust. Today's panel is the first in a monthly series on women in leadership brought to you by the Leadership Trust. For those of you who don't know us, Leadership Trust has been the trusted partner for people who want fulfilling and effective organisations through experiential leadership development for over 45 years now. We offer bespoke and open leadership development programs and coaching both online and in person. We're based in Ross-on-Wye, Herefordshire, and we operate around the world. As I said, my name is Emilie Cléret, and I'm honoured to be your host this morning. Before I introduce the panel, I'd like to invite you to drop any questions you may have into the Q&A section at any point during this call, and we'll have time to go through them later on during the panel. I'd also like to make you aware that this call is being recorded, and as I said, it will be available on replay later on, both on our blog and social channels. In case you have to pop off, don't worry, you can catch up later on. We have 4 panelists today, 3 of them at the moment. We have Leyla Okhai, the founder and CEO of Diverse Minds. Diverse Minds enables organisations to create mentally healthy and equal workplaces through coaching, training, speaking and consultancy. We have Reena Rai, blogger, public speaker, fashion influencer and award-winning digital marketing professional, currently working for a huge multinational tech company. We have Emilie Cléret. She's the first female to head a department within the Enseignement Militaire Supérieur. I should have asked you how to say that properly. Apologies. The French Higher Military Education. And she's been recently awarded the Palme Academic, an official award from the French government for distinguished service and innovation to education. All 4 of these women have forged their own leadership style whilst having to confront different leadership myths along the way. In doing so, they have achieved great success, and we wanted to celebrate them today on International Women's Day and hear their stories. Today, they'll be sharing their own leadership myths that they've gone on to bust and allow them to be their own authentic and awesome selves. So first, we're going to talk to Leyla. Hi, Leyla.
Hello.
Hello. So you've worked in some of the countries, if not the world's most known educational institutions, including the University of Oxford. And of course, afterwards, you branched out. You branched out into your own consultancy. What I wanted to know is what leadership myth did you break, and did you find that was something that you had to break when you were working for yourself or working for others?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tineke, and thank you for having me. I just want to say it's such an honour to be on a panel with such esteemed and wonderful women before I start. So yes, for me, it's, I think, working in elite institutions, particularly the University of Oxford. So I then went on to work at Imperial College, that many people will have heard of in the news with the COVID, which was a completely different experience. But there was a kind of one way of doing things around, I don't know if anyone's aware of, there's a model called white dominant culture, and I've only just come across it, but all the things that are in there around quality over quantity, around perfectionism, around paternalism, around there's only one right way, around putting the individual first, that I couldn't articulate that at the time, but that was very much part of the culture. And there really, as far as I'm concerned, my lived experience is there wasn't place for difference, and there certainly wasn't place for a South Asian perspective, diaspora perspective. And I think one of the things, and I think this is why it became a myth, was that you have to be quiet, you have to take a long time to do things, and that's not the way I operate. I am an impatient person, which isn't a good quality, but equally the way in which you had to do things, it would take years to do things. And also just around, you had to be demure. No one said it explicitly, but you couldn't voice yourself. You had to play the game, you had to be going along with the main trajectory, and you mustn't question and challenge too much. So I think that was, for me, that was really difficult because it's not the way I operate. And then working on my own now, what I found is it's the polar opposite. So what I am able to do, and the way in which I do work with people, is to challenge, and it is to push people and make them do things differently. And so that is a myth, because I think if you're true to yourself and you do what's right, and you know that you can map the gaps and see where the issues are, people actually do want to take that forward. But I can only do that, I feel, in my own business, and have the autonomy to do that, because I'm not constrained in the same way.
Challenges you found moving from you know, working for someone else to working for yourself?
I thought there would be more challenges. I think for me, it's been no. I haven't. I've actually found it. For me, it's been a real breath of fresh air, and I think that the only challenge is a lot rests on you, but there are lots of solutions around that. So there are ways in which you can collaborate, there are ways in which you can work with other people. But I have to say, you know, I joke and I say that I'm unemployable now because I can't go back to working for people and doing things in a constrained way. Even simple things like I want to try a new computer system, I want to purchase a free trial, I can do it. And that for me is, it sounds very simplistic, but it's incredibly freeing in terms of finding solutions.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be more questions, and I will bug you with more questions after I've gone around the panel. Thank you so much. Emilie, so you joined the French Army NCO Basic Training Academy before starting your career, after starting your career as a high school teacher. Was this move down to breaking through any barrier or myth, or did the myths that you had to break come later on in life? Oh, you're still on mute, Emilie.
Excuse me. Sorry, first I'd like to follow up on what Leyla said and say how privileged and honoured I feel today to be on a panel with such incredible women. I must say, ladies, reading your biography was quite daunting. So, you know, everything I'm going to say right now is with hindsight, because to be very honest, back in the days when all this started, I couldn't really compute what was going on and I was a bit in survival mode. So in fact, I ended up in the NCO, the Army NCO Training Academy a bit by chance, because I didn't really like my job as a high school teacher. And so I was thinking about what I could do, and this opportunity came by and you had to pay the bills. So I just kind of decided that would be a good solution. And, you know, here I am, nearly 14 years on in a different job, but still within the armed forces. So, I mean, in this environment, there are many leadership myths. And, you know, I sometimes secretly hope that I've busted more than one of them. So, as you might imagine, this is a very male-dominated environment that has nurtured over the years a lot of those myths and many leadership stereotypes too. Even more so when we're talking about military leadership. So, you know, this is male, white, confident, aggressive, ambitious, decisive. So the stereotype of military leadership is very aligned with the myth that qualities to be a leader are intrinsically more male than female, and that you will have to, and especially in this environment, there's this myth that you have to blend in to make it. So I guess that, and you know, again, this is with hindsight and after many years of, you know, battling through all this, I guess I could say that, you know, I tore apart the myth that you can't succeed in a leadership position in a military institution if you're a civilian woman wearing sparkly t-shirts. I would sum it up like that.
And I was going to say, do you still wear the sparkle? But I can see today that you do.
Yes,
go into
I do. Yeah. Ain't no one gonna dim my light now.
I like that. Do you find that anyone ever, you know, outright questions you or brings anything up, or was it all quite subconscious or, you know, covert?
Oh no, it was and you know, that's what I mentioned at the beginning. I was for many years I was pretty much in survival mode without, you know, thinking through what was going on. It was very, unfortunately, very outspoken. But I must say that things started to change when I also decided, what I realized is I wasn't focusing on the right things. And when I decided to finally focus on the right things, and therefore one of those things was finding allies, because yes, there were a lot of issues, but yes, there are also a lot of incredible male leaders in this environment who are open to change and who want to support change and who want to make change happen. So my focus, you know, was not in the right place because I was actually buying into all of those leadership myths. You know, I would guilt trip myself when I felt vulnerable. But of course I would feel vulnerable in this environment. I would put every effort into coming through as cold and omnipotent because I was buying into those myths. And I just stood by apologizing for being there and waiting for permission to lead, which are two very twisted habits women tend to develop. So, you know, when I stopped focusing on that and focused on where the opportunities were, where the allies were, then that's when things started to develop in a very positive way.
Amazing, thank you. And we'll have more questions for you as well after we get round to Reena. So, hello, Reena. You have worked for some of the largest names in the UK, including Harrods, and then you've made the move from maybe more fashion focused into tech. Have you found the barriers you faced changed when you swapped industry, or are they very much the same? And what leadership myth have you felt the need to bust?
There are so many cultural differences going from working for a British company to an American company. I think that's been the biggest step change for me, rather than going from one industry to another. I think with fashion, what I'll say is that The Devil Wears Prada might as well be a documentary. It's extremely accurate. So there were lots of different politics in that world, which is why I made the shift to tech. But changing to an American company has been a big step change. And I think particularly for myself, I'm an introvert. So that's the leadership myth that I've busted. In American companies, there's no space for introverts, so you have to quickly adapt. And by introvert, I mean, I am actually very much a people person, but my strength comes in one-to-one relationships rather than in big groups. So as part of my role, kind of pre-COVID, I was doing lots of events and speaking opportunities as well. And I would joke, if it was an event that I had planned, I'd joke with the team after we'd done the takedown of the event and say, okay, I'm going to go home now and just sit and speak to no one and just do nothing, because that's how I had to rebuild my energy. But being an introvert, working for a massive multinational tech company, I had to learn to navigate that world. So, you know, it doesn't come naturally for me to advocate for myself and push forward kind of my achievements, but the environment I found myself in, you know, every day people are emailing wrap decks of their achievements, a project that they've just done, and that is the way that you kind of move forward. You very much have to get your name known in the company. And I think the other challenge is having a US HQ and being in a remote office. There's different dynamics there because more often than not, you're expected to execute the work and not necessarily impact change. So a couple of tips that I've got that I picked up along the way. My strength is in those one-to-one relationships, and I really worked on, as Emilie said, building those allies. When I was pretty new into the company, I started working quite closely with the head of international comms. She saw that how I would work and that I was very thoughtful in the strategy that I put together. And I know that she has advocated for me in the rooms that she was in with senior leadership that I actually wasn't privy to. And I'm really grateful for allies such as her who have kind of pushed forward and advocated for the work I've done. Also, I found that when I'm writing those emails, as a Brit, it's much easier for me to think, I'm not writing for myself, I'm writing for Tineke, let me advocate for her. And it's way easier to sing someone else's praises than your own. So I kind of disengage myself from that. Of course, I'd put my name in there rather than Tin's, but in my mind, it was much easier to shout about someone else's achievements. And also kind of in my non-work life, I've been a blogger and content creator for about a decade. And with that, again, I'm not the best at shouting at all the things that I've done. T, you know that you and I have spoken about things that we've done, but we're just not very good at saying I've spoken at this event. And, you know, I speak at events pretty much on a monthly basis now, which is great. But I need to take that onus onto myself to be visible. And I found that it's easier for me to write a slightly self-deprecating, pithy post on social media and kind of advocate for myself there rather than you know, other avenues. And I would say for other introverts as well, one thing that I picked up that is really important is to have your elevator pitch down, because you will naturally through your career meet lots of people. You need that 1 minute 30-second line, and actually I learned this when I went to an event with a friend of mine who is an incredible photographer. I introduced him to the people that were running the event, and he said, "Hi, my name is X and I take photos." And you know, it's a cute little thing. He's got a company called Take More Photos. But I pulled him aside afterwards and said, you know, as someone that's older than you, he's Gen Z, so different generations. I said, look, you need to work on your elevator pitch. You've worked with Adidas, you've worked with Stormzy, you've worked with all these incredible companies. Have your 30 seconds down, and yes, be cute and be you when you explain who you are, but also have those accolades, because you never know what doors that's going to open for you.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that's really good advice. We do need to be our own cheerleaders a bit more, and yeah, be able to sing our own praises. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it for us? You know, and I guess it's not very much the British way of doing things. We're very much tight-lipped and very humble and all the rest of it. But yeah, we need to be better at shouting for each other, and maybe also, yeah, shouting for each other and shouting for ourselves. Pauline is having some technical issues. She is in the ether, she's in the background, but she isn't able to get in at the moment, so I'll continue on. We did have a question come in, Leyla, it was while you were talking, so I'm going to pose it to you first, but then anyone else can answer it too. And the question was, what happened when you did question and challenge? Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, I can say, because I know Denise, that's the question from Denise, isn't it? Yeah, it really wasn't pretty. So I was sidelined. My work was given to other people without my knowledge, so there was no discussion about it. I was seen as a troublemaker. I was seen as trying to galvanize people when I shouldn't have been. But again, it wasn't direct. It was very slow. It was very subtle. It was very drip feedy. It was, you know, the phrase, it's linked to microaggressions for me, and the term death by 1,000 cuts. That's how it felt, and just very slowly. And if I can just mention it, because I don't follow, and I don't like the royal family at all, but I heard 2 snippets on the news about the interview, and some of the things that she described for me is the kind of very elite English establishment, and I say English intentionally. So it was all of that. However, all was not lost, because I remember someone saying years later that don't forget the best teachers in life are not necessarily the people that nurtured and cared for you. Of course, that they are helpful too, but they're people that might have made your life very difficult and might have made your life very challenging, because then you can withstand things. And there's 2 sides to karma. So I think a lot of the people that had made my life difficult, they did get repercussions. It took a long time. But I was reading, it's something actually popped up this morning about karma, which was it's not about there's the negative side of it, like, you know, life comes round, life's difficult, you'll get what you put out there, but also that life will throw challenges at us to help us. And if I hadn't been through that, and if I'd been really comfortable, I'd probably still be in that job, right? So by that feeling that discomfort, I can also empathize with people. I can talk about it on, you know, if people invite me on podcasts, I can talk about it at events like this. And I can also, it makes me a better coach, it makes me a better trainer, it makes me a better facilitator. So that's how I've come to see it now, that everything in your life, as difficult as it is, and the hurdles that we do jump over, and sometimes we don't make it first time over those hurdles, are very useful and relevant to us in our lives.
Thank you. Really, really wise words there. Does anyone else want to answer that same question?
Yeah, I'll add to what Leyla says. You know, I was very, I could really respond to what and relate to what she was saying, because it's the same for me. So there was a lot of outspoken misogyny, but as she says, there's also that very subtle and, you know, well, very subtle and savvy backstabbing that goes on. And, you know, your work not being praised, but then when the results are there, all of a sudden your name disappears and you just become invisible. So that's very subtly maneuvered, and it is very hurtful. So and I agree that, you know, when you decide to react to that, it does become ugly. The word that really triggered for me in what Leyla was saying is troublemaker. So that's the constant narrative. As soon as you move forward and try and make things right because you know that what you're doing is the right thing, that's the constant narrative. So then I think the most important thing to do, and that's again another, you know, screwed up habit that we have as women, is the likability trap. And I did fall into that trap many times over and over again. And then things, you know, it's difficult. I'm not going to tell you it's not a rough ride, but the moment if you know that what you're doing has a true purpose and is there to achieve some very important things, then in my case is that I was convinced I was doing the right thing to develop better leaders for the military, because that is something important, to have decision makers that are, you know, self-aware. Then, you know, it's well, you know, things, you know, you can bounce back on the positive feedback that you get from those that you are supposed to train. And that's when I knew that I just had to keep going. So it's about, you know, finding your own legitimate space.
Thank you. Reena, I think this question might be for you, so I know you spoke about allies earlier, but how do you recognise or choose your allies?
That's a really good question. So I wouldn't go out and, like, I wouldn't say that I go out and think, oh, this person would be a great ally for me. I build those relationships first. So with the person who's very senior in comms, I was actually told that they were quite difficult to work with, and I said, okay, challenge accepted. And I just got into kind of her psyche, how she liked to work, and worked kind of in that. I respected her working style. It was perhaps a little bit more old school than I was used to, but I respected it and worked with her within the parameters. And I heard really great feedback from her. She would feedback on email, she would pop over. I used to sit next to my boss, and she would just tell me that I'd done a great job in XYZ. And I realized that she was advocating for me. And that's kind of when I started to lean into her being an ally for the work that I was doing. But there are also kind of more strategic things that I've done where, again, being in a remote office, you have the challenge of not necessarily being visible, particularly as the crossover timeline wise is pretty difficult between here and the west coast of the US. You get about 1 hour a day, so I am relying on people who are taking my feedback on. I think in what I do, I'm a specialist and an expert, so I lean into that. So as Leyla was saying, like, you know, sometimes when you're providing that feedback, I'm really passionate about what I do. So if something is wrong for my stakeholders, I will say it. And I've found that there are people in the US office who are very, very receptive to that. They understand my background. We've now worked together for a number of years, and they do take my feedback on, and they kind of pass it on for me. So I would say it's part art, part science. You need to seek out people that you need to build the relationships with. You do need to be strategic about it, and kind of figure out who has your back and who will kind of work as almost like a mouthpiece for the work that you're doing. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky to kind of give it a tick box list, but just go out there and be genuine and build relationships. And this is whether it's going out to find allies or to just build relationships in a network. People can tell if you're not being genuine, so bring your full genuine self to work, and lead with who you are. Some people might not be receptive to that. I definitely found that in the fashion industry, but the good people will appreciate that and appreciate your perspective and your point of view. And I think if you're seeking out an ally, be an ally to others. I'm a big advocate of being the change that you want to see in the world. And the reason that we're here today is that it is difficult for women who are in business, women who are working, women who are in leadership positions. So as much as you're looking for allies to help you, help others as well. And you'll create that environment where particularly women can stick together.
Thank you, Reena. This question I'm going to put out to anyone who wants to answer it. And it was, are there any tips for unlearning the instinct to not sing your praises, as that feels as if you're showing off?
I can chime in because it went a little bit quiet. I find it really difficult to say, oh, I did this, I did that. It just, yeah, as we chatted about earlier, it feels like it's a very un-British thing to do. From my observations, Americans actually learned this in school. They were very good at being on committees, advocating for themselves. The kind of world of higher education is extremely competitive. So you have to write your personal statements with a long list of extracurricular activities. So I've learned to be self-compassionate and not be hard on myself, because that's definitely not something that I experienced when I was growing up or early in my career. So what I've done actually is, and I've got to write an email later today about something that I did last week, but I just remove myself from it. I think about what the objective was, what the outcome was. You know, it was an amazing outcome, so why would I not want to shout about it? And I write it in a very factual way. You know, I'm going to write, for example, we worked on this project and the objective was this, the results were this is how we did it, because it's important to share that knowledge. And when people share kind of the work that they've done, I'm actually really appreciative of it. I'm a big advocate also of not reinventing the wheel. Working in a big multinational, if someone's done half the work or they've done something which would give me a jump off point, I'm actually really grateful that they've shared that information. So I'm sure that for me, putting out work that I've done, it can help others, inspire them to do something similar. But I just remove myself as much from the narrative that I'm writing as possible. It's a hard lesson to learn. I still do find it a little bit cringe. But I find it so much easier to write it so that I can be thoughtful about my words and make that email or that deck as useful as possible, rather than just saying it to someone or mentioning it on a call. So taking that time for me is really useful. And I probably over-egg it and go over the email way too many times. But I think, again, being an introvert, I just want to make sure that it's perfect. And yeah, that's the advice that I can offer.
Thank you.
I would like to add a few things. I think what Reena has just said is really important. I would add, you know, again, because that's my experience, I fell over and over and over again into the likability trap. So I think what's very important is focus, you know, focus on what you're doing, do it very, very, very well, and then work on the feedback, request feedback and work from the feedback. So in my case, the feedback comes from the officers we are training to be the future leaders. So that was a good way for me to put forward what I was doing, but without actually putting myself forward, if that makes sense. So I would ask for these very detailed feedback and then write a report, which, you know, it was the voice of other people speaking for me, which I found a little more comfortable than actually putting myself on the front line and saying, you know, I did this, because then, you know, that's when potentially the bad reactions would come up. And then it's about understanding that we are the authors of what we do, and for that, I think it's fundamental to focus on developing our own capacity to respond creatively, rather than in, you know, a patterned reactive way based on, well, as we were saying, the myth of textbook leadership, and identifying and acting upon opportunity. and doing things without expecting anything in return. And then, as Reena said, that's when, you know, it will happen that people will notice the value, the added value that you're bringing, and that then will reach out, and then that's how the allies start building and the network starts building.
I don't think I've got much more to add. I really hear Reena and Emilie's point about how I think using facts, using stats, using company missions, visions and aims is super useful. And also to reframe it in the sense of, I'm not showing off. Who am I not to share my knowledge? Who am I not to inspire people? Who am I not to be helpful? And I think if we can reframe it and don't see it showing off, but seeing it as sharing, potentially inspiring, building those connections, that can be really helpful in terms of how we see that as, you know, bragging to sharing, for example.
And Leyla, on that, obviously working for yourself now, I'm guessing you're having to be your own cheerleader a lot more. So I see that your podcast won an award earlier this year, and you've won awards for Diverse Minds as a company as well. Did you find that a challenge to kind of have to put yourself forward, or did you let other people nominate you and step back?
Yeah, so that's a great question. No, I nominated myself for all of them because I thought, why not? And actually I went in with no expectation. I thought, well, it's a good practice. Let me look at what I've done. It's actually quite a good tool for review. I can feed it into my business plans. I never expected to win any of those, and I genuinely mean that. And I remember with the Asian Business Chamber of Commerce Awards, I was sitting at the back and I was sitting with two colleagues from the charity Sense, who I just met that evening. And when they called my name, I couldn't even get up from my seat. I was like, no, this must be a mistake. This is weird. Like, at the NHS were in the same category as me, and they were shouting, get up, Leyla, get up, like, go collect your award. So I think it's great to be recognized, but I think it goes back to Emilie's point around, we must be mindful not to get into the likability trap. So awards are great, but we have to also be really strong in our own our own convictions, and just things won't go right, but just to keep going. And I think often it's a case of just keep going little and often. You're not going to get a 360 turnaround quickly. Sometimes you might, but to be realistic with yourself and to be honest, and also to celebrate your successes. So I'm not great at that, but to celebrate your successes. But again, I find it easier because working for myself, because I don't feel I've got someone behind my back going, who does she think she is? And people can scroll past my posts. That's cool. People can delete my newsletter if they don't like it. It's up to them. But for me, it's been much easier to do that.
Thank you. On the topic of successes, is there any moment, and this question is for each of you, is there any moment that you kind of went, yeah, I'm a success now? Like, what does success look like to you? And if you have attained it, or when you've attained it in the past, what did that look like, and how did you feel? How did you react? Who's going to go first? That big.
Yeah, well, I think success is probably when you stop falling into all the traps, and you actually see them ahead of you, and therefore you're able to avoid them. Because as Leyla just said, you know, there's not a moment in your life where you're just going to constantly get people clapping you along and cheering you along. That doesn't happen. There are moments it happens, there are moments it's more difficult. So I think success it's very important that you determine yourself what success means to you. In my case, it was, well, you know, getting out of all these traps, seeing them ahead of me and being able to avoid them, and being grateful for, in fact, what used to bring me down. So, you know, seeing things as an opportunity instead of seeing them as a threat. For example, I realized that it was in fact a true opportunity, that I wasn't taken seriously and that no one took interest into what I was doing. And I realized that in fact gave me space and freedom to focus on what I needed to do. I now feel very blessed that I got a lot of these things wrong at the beginning, because that is what, you know, pushed me to question why things weren't going the way I would like them to go. So I think it's the very important thing is to free yourself from, you know, caring about what people think, because obviously, you know, in my case, if you're the first woman in an environment and I'm still the only woman at all these meetings 10 years later, well, obviously people are going to think horrible things and you're not going to change that. You don't have control over that. But by freeing yourself of what people think, then, you know, you give yourself the own space and freedom that you need to focus on what you believe is your purpose and why you believe you belong there and why you believe what you do is important.
Speaking about purpose really, really resonates. And I think sometimes just holding on to that belief of why you're there and what you have to give is really important. I think for me, the notion of success has evolved over the years. When I was in my 20s, it was very much those accolades. It was very much getting my name known in the industry, building my network. And actually, Leyla, to your point, the first time that I won an industry award, like that, things changed. Suddenly I was being approached for jobs. I had jobs that were created for me. And actually a lot of my network spans back to those days. I don't like that kind of spotlight anymore. And I remember, you know, I was up for this award as best retailer and up against like Debenhams and really big companies. I worked for quite a small brand. And when they called my name, I thought it was a joke. I thought they did, was it the Golden Globes or where they said the wrong film? And I basically had to be dragged up on stage. So yeah, it's funny that we've had the same experience. But through my 20s, that was what was important to me. And I think in my field is marketing. So in marketing, your net worth is your network. But now that I'm in my 20s, I recognize that I was totally bought into the productivity myth where you had to be quote unquote a girl boss. You had to be doing 20,000 things at the same time. I was always working late. At Harrods, I had quite a large remit. So, you know, not even my boss, my director would sail past me at like 7 p.m. and be like, bye, Reena, don't work too late. And it's like, cool, I shouldn't actually be here. But I felt like I had to, and I had to prove myself. And with kind of my own extracurriculars, you know, blogging for about 10 years and doing a couple of different bits and pieces on the side, I thought I had to be busy all the time. There was a period of time where I was driving 90 miles a day to and from work. And, you know, I was also blogging every day back then. And I was getting probably about 4 or 5 hours sleep, which looking back is extremely unhealthy. So now that I'm in my 30s, my success actually is in my work-life balance. It's a cliche, but I want to work smarter, not harder. I don't want to do those long hours anymore. You know, prior to COVID, I'd be enjoying my life. I'd be spending time with friends, you know, my godchildren, nieces, nephews, family. Now, obviously, it's quite different, but I'm still very protective over my time. And it doesn't matter what you do with your time, it's yours to spend as you want. So, you know, at the moment I'm watching Scandal again for like the 3rd time, but it doesn't matter, that's my time. And I'm employed to work for a set number of hours. I will do that. If I go over and above, I'm not getting like a medal, I'm not getting a trophy for doing that. And one thing that I just want to impart, if you take one thing away from all of the things that I've said, is rest is as important as being productive. You need to take that time, especially now, because we're going through something so difficult. It's been a year of the pandemic nearly, and it does take a toll. So make sure that you're prioritizing yourself and your health and well-being over and above anything else.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Reena. And for me, I think I always think about David Olusoga. He recently said, I don't feel like a success, I feel like a survivor. And that's often how I feel. And of course, my lived experiences are different to his, but that's just, I could never articulate what it was. And so I think it is about good deeds. I think it is about kindness. I think it is about what you put back. For me is success, and kind of what you want to mirror. So what you put out comes back to you. value, you know, kindness for your family, if you have a traditional family, if you have a non-traditional family, for your friends, if you volunteer, that for me is success. It's about being kind and spreading those good deeds.
Thank you, everyone. I'm wary of the time and that everyone has very busy, very successful lives, whichever that looks like. I'm quickly going to ask if anyone has any questions from the audience. Otherwise, I am going to say my thanks. Give everyone a second. Yeah, it was very inspirational to talk to you all today. And I see Shannara said there's no questions, just encouraging you all to celebrate yourselves, which I think is lovely. And I think you should all celebrate yourselves. There's a reason why we were gagging to have you on our first ever panel, because you are all amazing and inspirational women, and you are all putting so much good into the world, whether you know it or not. Denise says that it was amazing, and I completely echo her. I've loved having you all on this panel. Hopefully we can invite you on to future ones to talk more specifically and in more detail about your individual lives. We will be running these Women in Leadership panels once a month. So the next one is the 8th of April. We will choose a different time that maybe will work better for everyone, because early mornings were not my thing today. So I may be the one to take that on and change the timing. But I want to thank you all for being here. And thank you everyone who has listened. If you've missed any of it, if you missed the beginning, we will put this on our social channels so that you can watch it again. I'd like to thank Emilie, Reena and Leyla personally for attending, and I will give you back your mornings.
I just want to chime in and say, T, thank you so much for organising this. You are one of my favourite people, and you're always advocating for others. So I just wanted to say that you are an incredible woman in everything that you've done. I've got quite a lot of insight into kind of your life and work, because we've known each other a while. And I just wanted to turn the spotlight back on you and say that this event was really great. It was the best way to kick off International Women's Day. Thank you for putting this together. I've learned so much from the other panelists as well. And don't forget that you're amazing too.
Thank you. I didn't even pay her to say that. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.